Portland Art Museum's new exhibit, Global Icons Local Spotlight, contemporary art from the collections of Jordan D. Schnitzer, is opening this weekend. You could see more than 65 works by celebrated artists of the 20th century, including Andy Warhol, Helen Frankenthaler, Ellsworth Kelly, and Robert Rauschenberg. This will all be on view through January 11th, right through the opening of PAM's new expanded campus, which is happening on November 20th. Kids 17 and under are always free. Grab your tickets now at portlandartmuseum.org. You have less than a month left to get your badges for Rose City Comic Con, Portland's premier pop culture event, and they have an even more star-studded roster with indie film icon and White Lotus Season 3 star Parker Posey in attendance. And that's along with members of the Dungeons & Dragons web series Critical Role and Doctor Who stars Christopher Eccleston and Billy Piper. This is all happening September 5th through the 7th, and you can go grab your badges now at rosecitycomiccon.com. That's rosecitycomiccon.com. Portland Street Response, or PSR, launched in 2021 to ease pressure on our police and fire departments by sending unarmed responders to nonviolent mental and behavioral crisis calls. However, the program has had a rocky path, struggling to find its place within the city and secure staffing and resources. This year, though, the program got a boost. Mayor Keith Wilson expanded its scope, and City Council voted to make PSR an equal branch of the city's public safety system, with a long-term goal of 24/7 service. So today on CityCast Portland, we're talking with April Roa, PSR's interim program manager, and Caroline Pope. That's their community engagement and outreach coordinator. They're going to fill us in on what's changed, what challenges remain, and how close they are to hitting their 24/7 service goal. It's Thursday, September 4th. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. So just immediately, for people who haven't heard of Portland Street Response, can you explain how it works day to day and what kinds of situations you're typically called to handle?
Yeah, definitely. So we are part of the first response model, and we're accessed through 911. So the calls that we are responding to are what we say nonviolent, low acuity mental health calls. So these are outside calls or calls in public places. These could be welfare checks, someone who is down and looking, unwell or unresponsive outside. These are low acuity mental health crisis calls related to substance use or intoxication related. These are potentially disturbances or trespasses due to mental health or substance use. And those calls, again, will be out in public. They could be in a business or in a public space, but no locked doors.
Gotcha. Well, PSR has expanded a lot since City Council voted earlier this year to, make it an equal branch of public safety. That's alongside with police and fire. So your teams can now respond to many more types of calls. Has that changed the work that your teams are doing at all? Or is it just an expansion of services? I'm just curious if anything went into effect.
I'll take that one. And as far as how our responders respond to calls, it's the same. It's just more of the where has changed. And some of the expansion that we're talking about is also, I know expansion of hours has been talked about a lot. We're not quite there yet. We're still staffing up to be able to expand those. But that's to handle the call volume that we've experienced this year. Some of that might be from being able to go inside public spaces. Some of that might be just more need out in the community. We don't know why. We just know that we are finding ourselves in higher demand.
Yeah. Well, thanks, April. I know the ultimate stated goals of PSR are, aside from serving the community, are also reducing strain on first responders and actually improving outcomes for people in crises, getting those wait times down, all that. So what data are you seeing that shows things are moving in the right direction?
I think that's a really great question. Right now, it really is about the expansion of calls. So are we taking more calls that would have traditionally gone to police? The answer is yes to that, and continuing to do so. With the policy that came out earlier this year, the co-response policy, which was really solidifying some of our current practices, police are more apt to call for us than maybe perhaps they were previously, as we continue to work through understanding and how we hand off a call. There's a lot of training that we've been working on internally on how police arrive at a scene and how we arrive at a scene, and like trying to marry those two worlds so that we can have the best outcome for clients. So there's a lot more communication. We're, like I said, being called to more calls where we can potentially help change the outcome. It's really been an awesome year for PSR in that regard.
Yeah, I personally was I would know if the word is excited, but like comforted in knowing that it appeared that this city council, they appear to be a lot more supportive of PSR.
Yes.
And I really think that's wonderful. Have you been feeling that yourselves, in your program at all?
I'm just going to chime in here. This is Caroline. I've been in the program working with PSR for about 3 years now. And yes, I would say, we've always had this great public support that has been pretty amazing. People are really happy to see us out on the streets. People are proud to know that their city has a program like this. But now we have, the city backing us as well. So having city council and having the mayor really feeling that enthusiasm from them, I think it's palpable.
Yeah, I mean, just personally, that was an indicator for how things were not working with previous form of government, where in groups or programs as yourselves that everyone was like, yes, let's do it, didn't appear to be fully backed by the full city council, and it never made sense. But I just wanted to circle back. Like, has there been actual data, though? Like, have they shared, this is the data that we're seeing that shows that things are moving in the right direction? I'm just wondering if there's that tail end part where you guys are actually doing data sets or whatever. I'm just curious.
No, that's a great question. And that's one big challenge of having what we're calling an alternative response, and something that we've been working on internally, because the typical performance measures that you use in first response are all about response time, number of calls. And
Totally.
And when we're trying to do something different and our story is different, we don't feel that those are accurately reflecting the work that's being done. These calls take longer to have another outcome, to really develop the trust in the field. We don't respond lights and sirens to things, so our response times aren't going to be the same as fire or police. So trying to really unpack what those measures need to be that are telling the PSR story, that's something that we've been working on internally for, I would have to say, the last 9 months. We have developed a set of performance measures in conjunction with those that the city has asked to see, but also what we feel is going to tell our story. And we've had to work on revamping our charting system to capture those. And that's something we're looking to go live with here in the next couple of months to start better capturing the story of PSR.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. You touched on something I wanted to also ask, which was wait times. I know, you're designed to take pressure off police and fire for these nonviolent crises, but wait times are still as long as 40 minutes. I'm wondering if this is something that you guys are working on, because I live in St. John's. As you might know, they just opened up a day center. So activity up here has almost tripled, with sometimes people having crises or breaking windows, stuff like that. I have called, and I mean, I never saw anyone come through, and the person left, and I was just like, oh no, is this what is happening? Because that feels like not productive.
Yes, and you are correct. It is something that we have been looking at extensively. There's no one answer. One of those, like I said, we don't respond lights and sirens. So we're subject to regular traffic flows. So if there's a traffic jam, there's a very likely we're stuck in it as well. We do not mandate overtime for our staff. So any vacancies that we have in our response for that day is voluntarily filled. So if we don't have any volunteers to fill those, then we're down how many responders we have out on the road that day. We do strive to have a minimum of 2 units at all time, but that's 2 units citywide. And like when we began the fiscal year last year, 24-25, we were down 16 positions. We had 16 vacancies. And so we've been working this last year to fill those. So that's a big reason why our response times weren't any better either. So that's why when we went to City Council and the mayor this year for our ask, it was, we need to be able to get the positions that meet our call load so that we can then better strategically place our units throughout the city and have more units during our peak call hours. So we've looked at what our peak call hours are, what are the staffing numbers that we think are appropriate, and where can we kind of strategically place our crews throughout the day to handle those higher call volumes. So we've been kind of practicing what we're calling our district plan, so giving each unit a district, and we're hoping to go live with that here in the next couple of months. But again, we're still hiring into these positions that were just awarded in this budget cycle. So those just got created, and now we're beginning the recruitment phase. No, it sounds really easy, but it's different than hiring police or fire. We are a multidisciplinary team, so that means we have to hire for all these different disciplines. So those are separate recruitments for each one. So everything we're doing is really complex on this back end, but we've got a solid plan and we're moving ahead pretty steadily.
Can I just chime in, Claudia, too? Because I've done outreach in St. John's, and I know that there's frustration there about PSR and how long it takes, our response times.
Because especially, and I want to say, sorry to jump in, Caroline, but for listeners who are just like, why? What's wrong? St. John's is bottlenecked way up north. So just add 20 minutes to any kind of commute.
And then maybe there's a train running.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to get out there. We're, right now, all our crews are coming from Southwest Portland, like the west side of the Ross Island Bridge. So I hear that frustration, and it's something that I hear from community members in St. John's a lot. I know even some of them have said, well, why should we call PSR if no one's going to show up and the person's going to be gone? It's going to take 40 minutes. What does it mean? So I guess what we're saying is that hopefully with this districting move, at least we'd have some rigs that would be a little bit closer on the right side of the river to maybe get there faster. And then having staffing, we're looking at, 14 additional staff coming on. We are just kind of slowly building up to that. And I know it can be frustrating. And I know, especially in those neighborhoods, Selwood is another area, it takes a long time to get out to, farther out in parts of East Portland. So I think we all hear that for sure, and are just kind of trying to work and address that.
All right, well, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, will the increase in day centers and overnight shelters change how Portland Street Response operates? Cathedral Park Co-Housing is creating a community of connection and belonging in North Portland. Their common spaces are designed for accessibility, helping create a multi-generational, mixed-income, and mixed-ability community that welcomes everyone. Plus, their land is walking distance or a very short drive to many amenities, including, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful parks in our city and plenty of nature trails. To learn more about Cathedral Park Co-Housing and see if it might be a right fit for you or a loved one, go to cathedralparkcohousing.com/events. That's cathedralparkcohousing.com/events, and sign up for a virtual information session or just call Alicia at 503-319-5003. Act soon because they are close to breaking ground and homes are selling fast. With the increase of day centers, has the city given PSR a directive to possibly be more active in those areas? Or, as you were saying, we're thinking about like where we're going to set up, districts or little command centers. Has that at all come up?
Well, I don't know. I know that what we've been talking about internally is more with on our follow-up side. And we don't talk enough about what our follow-up or aftercare team does. We're pretty excited about the day centers because one of the biggest challenges we have is when our frontline responders go out, respond to a 911 call, they meet with somebody, they develop that trust. This person is looking for further assistance and is willing to engage with our aftercare team. Those teams then put in a referral to our aftercare. So the next morning, our folks go out and try and reconnect with this person. Oftentimes, we can't find them. About 50% of the time is pretty much the average of when we can reconnect with these folks. So with the day centers, if we can say they're going to be here at this place in this time, then that's our opportunity. We're excited to be able to get out there and connect with them and actually help them navigate those next steps to meeting the goals that they've set for themselves. So for us, we're working on internally developing those relationships with the day centers. I think that the community has concerns about people are dumped out in the street and now they're hanging out here where they may not have been, and that's what we're trying to address in those spaces is like, what is the next step for folks and getting them to that longer term care.
Yeah. I mean, I know you guys are figuring stuff out, but like if there isn't a plan that's being actively communicated to these communities, I foresee, as you probably do, a lot of tension building, especially with the outer neighborhoods that already aren't getting much support because of their physical space. So I ask again, like, has there been any discussion with like, hey, these day centers are opening in these communities, they're already feeling abandoned. Is there anything happening?
I would say that, yes, there are lots of discussions. We have weekly ongoing meetings, not only internally with the city, but with a lot of our other partners that are in the metro area, trying to address every single one of these issues. We're working hard to ensure that we're not duplicating efforts, that we are, there's only so many total. So, and how can we serve those communities that have been underserved? PSR is citywide. So yes, call us. We will respond citywide. And part of what we're trying to do with the districting, we're starting out slow, but we're doing an east side and a west side. And then the hope is that as we build, we can build that out further so that, yes, we are strategically placing similar to how police do their districts. Like they have districts all over so that we have somebody strategically placed in those areas. And that's where, as I'm looking at the future, that's my dream. This is where we need to get to. And we're beginning that work now.
We are expanding our hours soon. And the shelters, a lot of the shelters, they close in the morning, right? They close some of them as early as 6, 7, 7:30. So the thought maybe is that our staffing coming on starting earlier will also be there and we'll be able to respond to calls earlier. Previously, we weren't really getting out until about 8 a.m. or so.
8 to 10, right?
8 to 10. And so we're working, very soon, we're going to be expanding those hours on either side. So we're looking at 6 to midnight coming up.
Oh, cool.
I think just to go back to the day centers, which it's going to be a little chaotic at first, right? Like a lot of new programs, and they're going to have to figure out the right staffing ratio and figure out what it looks like. But to have a place, especially once winter comes in, to have these spaces, to have people to go to get resources, to get a shower, to get food, to connect with a community health outreach worker is really going to be helpful. And our teams will still respond in those areas, but we don't necessarily do like preemptive responses, right? So we will still be responding, of course, and collect data if we see that there's a rise in number of calls around those day centers. But I think, as April mentioned, it also will be a space that we can utilize with our aftercare, which is really doing that like case management with our clients and could potentially interact with those folks.
Yeah. Well, what's the main roadblock you think preventing from the 24/7 coverage? And to be honest, like I get why people want that, and I think that's a wonderful goal, but like what is that main roadblock?
The roadblock is the time it takes to hire and staff and having those positions. So like I said, last year, we started the fiscal year down 16 positions. We fought hard to fill those. And I think we ended up with 13 out of the 16 filled by the time we entered this fiscal year. So this fiscal year, we've got an additional 14. And that's not counting attrition, which, as Caroline had mentioned, our morale is up. So our natural attrition is changed significantly this year. But so we started this fiscal year with the 14 new positions, plus we had the 3 left over, and we lost 3 folks so far this year. So we're looking at, 20 positions to fill. So training for each position takes about 10 to 12 weeks. So we look at that, and we have to have staff to be able to train them. So it just is the time that it takes, which ours is pretty accelerated in comparison to other first response models. So it really is just the time that it's going to take for us to fill staff appropriately and get to that level.
Yeah. Well, a big part of what you do is working with community members and these partner organizations. Caroline, What are you hearing from community members about the impact that PSR is having?
Yeah, I mean, I think as I kind of alluded to before, I think people are so happy that we're an option.
Hmm.
But I'm also hearing a lot of what you brought up. It's just this response time is too slow, and that can be hard. When someone is in distress and they're on the corner of, Sandy and 82nd, and they don't have any pants on, and they're throwing rocks, and you want to help, and you call, you're expecting someone to show up faster. And
Yeah.
I think it can be hard when it takes that long.
It's heartbreaking to
It is.
see. I mean, something that happened just, maybe a handful of months ago was there was a young woman in St. John's. She was half naked, and there were just groups of women didn't know what to do, and so they were holding up their like pieces of clothing and stuff, and they didn't know who to call. And they were just doing this because they were just like, we can't leave her here. And so I can only imagine that story is happening in other places. So I know you have a lot on your plate, but I'm curious about the actual community that you are serving. Are you seeing any difference in the way that these people in crisis are responding to responders? Is it still a struggle every time they get a call?
Well, I mean, something again, so you always have to remember in the work that we do is that our services are voluntary. Like someone has to agree to want to work with us. And so there's so many cases where our responders will show up, with the intention to help this person. And they might just say, screw off, I don't want to talk to you. And that's real. And there's nothing more we can do then, right? We can't force our services on anyone. And if someone doesn't want to engage with us, that's kind of it. So that definitely comes up. And unfortunately, it comes up more than we want it to, but that's real. And we just kind of have to rely on the skills of our responders. I'm not hearing it as much anymore, but I think for a while there was a lot of confusion around who we are. Were we going to sweep camps? Were we rapid response, which is the folks who come up and clean campsites? What kind of work are we doing? What are we forcing people into doing? But, we don't enforce laws. And I think it's also important for the public to know that. We can't force anyone to take down their tent. We can't force anyone to put clothes on, all of these things. So we are coming out to de-escalate and stabilize the situation, and hopefully, again, create that relationship that will lead to more resources and more referrals. But we can't force these services on anyone. Is that kind of answering your question?
Yeah, but now I have more questions
Okay.
because let's go back to this woman who was on the corner. If you were to come through and this woman who was very much having a moment of some sort of psychotic break was not into the help, you would just leave her there.
And this is April, going to jump in here. And that is a possibility. Unless and this is why we have our trained folks, unless we are able to determine that this is a higher level acuity, then that is where we might call in Project Respond to come into an assessment for that higher level. We do the low level. We'll bring them in on some of these more complex cases. So we don't want to walk away from anybody either. And this is where our partnership and how we work with Project Respond really matters. So when it goes beyond our scope, they are that higher level of care.
What is Project Response?
Project Respond is the Multnomah County mobile crisis response that's dispatched through the crisis line. And so their staffing, they staff for that higher acuity. Since we have like the lower level acuity, that's what we staff for. So when we need that higher level of care, they're the ones that will come in and initiate some of that higher level of care.
So they can go into a private residency. They can do some of the stuff that we don't, and they might be pulled in by Portland police, for instance, who've cleared a scene, and they might come into a residency to do those higher acuity calls. So when someone is really in danger of harming themselves or harming others. I just wanted to add on, yes, and I know. So we create the rapport, hopefully, and we're doing the communication. If the person still doesn't want to engage with us and we do need to leave, maybe there's a call for her the next day. And maybe actually the next day we have more luck in creating that relationship and maybe offering her some resources and getting her to a shelter or a day center. I think what is important to know is that our response times can be long because it takes a long time to create those relationships. And it's a long game. We have many clients who we are responding to very frequently, and it takes a long time sometimes to build up that relationship and that rapport and for people to trust us.
So can regular citizens call Project Respond first?
No, absolutely. That's through the crisis line. So Multnomah County Crisis Line is available to anyone to call. That's one thing that we don't talk a lot about, the behind the scenes. And so between the Bureau of Emergency Communications, the Multnomah County Crisis Line, and even the 988, they all work behind the scenes together to figure out the appropriate response. So they will triage calls and they'll communicate between each other to figure out what the right response is for a call. So there is no wrong door to really entering services. If we go out and we determine it's a higher level of acuity, we'll bring them in. So it really has improved the system as a whole. And we're all working together to make sure that the right responders getting to the call.
Cool. Well, I just wanted to hear that because, and I hate hypotheticals. I'm so sorry I dragged you into that world with me. But like in that hypothetical, what I heard was, we're leaving, bye, and I'm like, that's not what happens though, right? And it's like, no, right. Then Project Respond comes through. And that's something that you guys are able to call in and something that does happen. It's like a regular occurrence. Okay.
And that's how you feel on your side. I mean, on the civilian side or, the bystander side, it looks like that, right? It looks like they dropped off a water bottle and left, and there's still, someone who is obviously in huge distress on the side of the street. Like, what's next? And just, I think knowing that it takes a long time sometimes to get that right support and to get the right care for someone and to, the right person who's going to come on in and the person's going to want to work with them and receive services. There's just a lot of people with a lot of needs, as we all know right now, out in the streets. And it's hard to see that and hard to see people in distress.
Yeah, and some of those more complex calls, it might look that way in the beginning where we're dropping something off. We've tried, and you may not see it, but we might be parked down the street watching as we're waiting for Project Respond to show up. So we're keeping an eye on the client until we know that they're able to get there and engage. And we try to do that as a regular practice. We keep eyes on the situation and we're monitoring until we can get that handoff.
Well, April, Caroline, I appreciate the time that you've taken to answer all of my real and not real questions. I mean, I'm always so excited to see you out in the community. I know there's a lot of us that are just so happy that you guys still exist, and I hope that you get all the support that you need. But yeah, thanks so much for all the work that you do for the city. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claudia.
And now for some events happening this week. Every Thursday on the show, we like to bring you a few recommendations to help you plan your weekend. Here's what we got. PICA's TBA Festival, or the Portland Institute for Contemporary Art's Time-Based Art Festival, is kicking off tonight. Going on its 30th year, they're bringing experimental and contemporary art from all around the world to our city. It's 10 days of performances, exhibitions, and music, and I gotta say, this festival always feels way more like a party than a stuffy, pretentious art festival. Some of my best memories in this town actually come from late night hangs at their beer garden. Checking them out is highly recommended. Rose City Comic Con is also starting this Friday and going through Sunday. You can meet cast members from Stranger Things, Walking Dead, The Goonies, and so many more. Plus an all-star list of your favorite comic book writers and artists, including hometown hero Kelly Sue DeConnick. And if none of that is your bag, this Saturday, the German American Society of Portland is having an Oktoberfest in Rose City Park. There's going to be music, food, and beer from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. at their German house. If you'd like earlier access to our event picks, becoming a member and joining our CityCast Neighbor program gets you an events preview delivered every Monday. Plus, you get ad-free listening and not to mention free tickets to events and happy hours with fellow CityCast neighbors. Head over to membership.citycast.fm to learn more. That's membership.citycast.fm. And for even more local events and news, sign up for our daily newsletter, Hey Portland, or check out our website at portland.citycast.fm. We'll throw a link to all this in the show notes. Well, that's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you with Slims.